Over the weekend, US President Barack Obama narrowly avoided a government shutdown when he struck a last-minute deal with Republicans on funding the budget for the remainder of the financial year. The compromise cuts $38 billion from the budget, the largest cuts in American history. But it's a temporary relief, with battles over the budgets and America's huge deficit set to continue. To discuss the budget deal and the political implications, we're joined by CBS election analyst and resident scholar at the conservative think tank, the American Enterprise Institute, Norman Ornstein. Norman Ornstein, welcome to Late Line.
Thank you, Ali.
An 11th hour budget deal for the fiscal year, as we just said. That means no government shutdown in the US. But who came out of this deal with the upper hand?
Well, I think you'd have to say that John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, probably is a bigger winner than anybody else. He had to navigate through some very, very tricky waters here. He's got an ardent group of conservatives, 87 freshmen, more than a third of his majority, who are new, and they wanted much, much bigger cuts. A group of senior conservatives who wanted to go them even a little bit better and a little further. And to make this work without a shutdown, understanding that a shutdown would more than likely hurt the Republicans more than the Democrats, that's what happened the last time in 1995, he came out of it with more cuts than I think he believed he would get. But frankly, Ali, nobody's a big winner here. And this is just a skirmish in what's going to be a much, much longer war with many more significant battles ahead.
Well, indeed, the two key battles, I guess, budget for 2012 and perhaps more in the short term, the need to raise the limit on government borrowing.
We have a very weird system in the United States that requires periodic increases in the debt limit, presumably to bring some fiscal discipline to the process, but they all become politicized. Now, we've never defaulted on debt in our history, the entire history of the country. This time the confrontation, which begins in basically just a few weeks, May 16th is the date that the Treasury Secretary has said we will hit the debt ceiling. And we have about another 6 weeks after that where he can use extraordinary measures. But conservatives who are emboldened by what happened with this short-term budget deal are now saying Armageddon is ahead. They're going to demand much, much more draconian cutbacks, including in the big entitlement programs, Medicare and Social Security, now, and things the president and the Democrats won't agree to. So avoiding another confrontation with much more serious consequences. We have no idea what would happen if we actually, for the first time, could no longer count on the full faith and credit of the United States. At minimum, interest rates go up and the markets go haywire. And then we head to those battles, as you say, over 2012, which will come a few months down the road.
Well, indeed, the president's senior political advisor says a failure to raise the debt limit could be a catastrophic failure for the US economy. Is that the implication?
That is the implication. It's not just the president's senior advisor. I bumped into Jamie Dimon, the head of Morgan Stanley, and I think you have a consensus among almost every figure in and out of government, current and former chairman of the Federal Reserve, the heads of big financial institutions, the major business executives, that to default on American debt would be catastrophic. We don't know exactly how. At minimum, as I suggested, people who hold American debt, T-bills, Treasury bills and notes and dollars, are going to say, gee, we never thought something like this could happen. Even if it doesn't create Armageddon right now, we want a premium, a risk premium, and that means our interest rates will go up, which, ironically, for those who want more budget discipline, is going to mean higher borrowing costs for the federal government and more deficits.
It's an interesting dynamic then, isn't it, with the House? I mean, John Boehner, he's also said that, quote, there won't be an increase in the debt limit without something really, really big attached to it. So how far can the Republicans push, knowing the potential outcome of failure?
Well, there are some real limits. And, you know, Boehner, right after the elections last November, which made him Speaker of the House, his first message to his new members coming in was, you know, we're going to have to be grown-ups here, and there are going to be things we're going to have to do, swallowing hard. We don't want to do them because that's part of the responsibility of governing, and the example was the debt limit. So Boehner knows that a failure to increase the debt limit could have dramatic consequences for not just him and his party politically, but for the nation. And it's much more significant than just not being able to pay for a portion of government for a few weeks, which is what a shutdown would have meant. But how he gets through this with his conservatives emboldened after his last victory means that he could only spend a few hours doing his little victory dance and now has to deal with a much, much larger potential crisis. The same, of course, is true of President Obama.
Well, indeed. I was going to say to you that Republican Paul Ryan put out that plan to cut $6 trillion over the next decade in spending. We're yet to hear from the president. He's due to release his plan this week. How detailed do you think it will be? Will it be specific? Will it give guidelines? Will it give timeframes?
It'll give guidelines. Yeah, it'll give guidelines and timeframes. It won't be specific. Paul Ryan's plan had some specifics, but not a lot in a lot of ways. He talked about the ways in which he would reduce health care costs without getting very specific into them, and of course about converting our Medicare program into a voucher program, ironically using regulated private health insurance exchanges that are very much the same as the ones that were harshly criticized by Ryan and his colleagues when they were a part of the Affordable Care Act that they call Obamacare. But not a lot of detail on those either. And economic assumptions that are a little bit shaky in terms of what would be saved. We know pretty much what the president is going to do. He's going to call for significant changes in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, but not dramatically transforming the programs, and applying those tax cuts to the rich. It'll be a very substantial difference in approach to what the Republicans have on the table. You know, this is the kind of debate that'll take months, if not longer, to play out. But we don't have months when it comes to the debt limit.
Well, you don't have months.
Those parameters becomes key.
You don't have months with the debt limit, but I guess you also don't have months in terms of heading into the real race proper for the White House next year. And how important is this for Obama's authority, and particularly given that he doesn't have a reputation for embracing big cuts?
Well, you know, for President Obama, if he doesn't come out with a plan that at least has some surface credibility in terms of reducing the debt as much as Ryan's plan, and keep in mind that Ryan's plan doesn't balance the federal budget for 20 years or more. If you take reasonable assumptions, maybe not until 2050, and adds many trillions to the debt in the meantime, because he includes even more tax cuts. So the president has to at least equal that, if not better it. And then we're going to get a big debate in the country. Ryan's plan involves dramatic transformations in some of these core programs that most Americans, most observers have felt you couldn't even consider. Last year, interestingly, when Ryan had his own roadmap before he was the chairman of the Budget Committee and the designated person here, he had only 16 Republican co-sponsors for a plan that would turn Medicare into a private voucher program. Now he's got the Republican leadership behind him, and we're going to have a real engagement on these issues for what vision Americans have for government. That'll inform the 2012 campaign. But I have to tell you, if we have economic turmoil in the meantime caused by this set of confrontations, maybe shutdowns later in the year, along with challenges over the debt limit, that's going to overshadow a lot of the other stuff. People are more concerned with what the economy is now than the theoretical issue over what happens to programs a little bit further down the road. Absolutely fascinating. Norman Ornstein, many thanks for joining us. Fun and games here in the U.S.